Rose McLean for inviting me here. And I think we have a very great audience. It's a very great program. I didn't know it existed until they said it's been going on for 5 years. I said, where have I been for the past 5 years? But first of all, I'd like to greet you on behalf of the President of the United States, Barack Obama, and the Secretary of Commerce, Gary Locke, and my immediate boss, David Henson in Washington. I'm the Northeast Regional Director with the U.S. Department of Commerce, the Minority Business Development Agency. It's an agency within the Department of Commerce. It is the only agency in the federal government that is devoted solely to assisting minority-owned companies grow and expand in the United States. And we have a network of business enterprise centers all across the country, and half a dozen in the immediate area here in New York. And I want to say that, as a backdrop, no sector of the small business community has been more dynamic, more creative and successful in turning obstacles into successful enterprises than minority business enterprises. They've created more net new jobs over the past 10 years than all the corporate 500 companies combined. That may sound interesting, but the corporate 500 companies haven't created as many jobs over the past measured periods as minority-owned companies have. Now, that's a phenomenal story, but I think what you should know is that in this administration, for example, Barack Obama has a major emphasis on focusing on minority-owned companies and helping to grow them out to size. We have a great effort. President Joe Biden, for example, has been designated as a point person to work with the Secretary of Commerce and all of the 50 governors around the country to assure that all of the $787 billion in Recovery Act money, and that flows down to the state and local level, that minority-owned companies be positioned to connect with those opportunities. And I've been in touch with all the state governors in my region. I cover 14 states, from Maine to West Virginia, and in working closely with New York State Governor David Patterson and the Director of Minority Business there, Michael Jones Bay, and we have workshops set up all the way through the spring. If you haven't heard of them yet, stay tuned, because you're going to be getting schedules of the kinds of opportunities that's going to be available to fit your company profile. But I just want to go back and explain what the landscape is like, because as Roger said, it is not all as it appears to be. When the reports came out that minority-owned companies were the fastest growing sectors in the small business community, you know, I've been working with this for several decades now. Before I took this job, I was Deputy Commissioner of the New York State Commerce Department for 12 years with Governor Cuomo. And I set up the Minority Business Enterprise Center in 25 in key cities around the state. I don't know, have you ever heard of the Entrepreneurial Assistance Program? Have any of you attended that program? We have one here in Manhattan, one in all the key cities in the state. Well, those programs still exist. But when I saw the headlines that we're the fastest growing sector, and African American owned companies, all minorities were 35% success rate, the increase, while the non-minority was decreasing. And African American increased faster than anybody else at 46%. I said, something is, I got to balance this out with some reality. So I started researching. What I found was that it's true that African American owned companies were the fastest growing sector of the minority community. But when I looked at the minority business community, we've increased from 300,000 4 decades ago, when this agency was created. There were only 300,000 minority-owned companies in the whole country. Today, there are over 4 million minority-owned companies in the country. That's what I did. When the headlines came out, 4 million minority-owned companies, I said, hooray. But then when I looked at, only 3%, and here's the reality check, only 3% of that 4 million minority-owned companies are grossing $1 million a year. Now, $1 million company may sound like a big company to a lot of people, but $1 million company is a small company. 5 or 6 employees, not very many. But half the 3%, half of all minority-owned companies that are grossing $1 million a year are Asian-owned. 30% of all minority-owned companies that are grossing $1 million a year are Hispanic-owned. Only 8% of all minority-owned companies that are grossing $1 million a year are owned by African Americans.